The hospital always had its own strange kind of music, an odd blend of cold air conditioning, coffee that had been reheated too many times, and that faint lemon scent that clung to everything. If someone didn't know better, they'd think the place was trying to feel comforting. But Kelly knew better. She had spent too many hours listening to the hum of machines and the constant shuffle of footsteps to believe that. She sat at the foot of the bed, fingers laced so tightly her knuckles were pale. Her wrist ached, but not nearly as much as her heart. The room felt too bright, too clean, too quiet, yet somehow too loud at the same time. Every tick of the wall clock felt like an announcement, as if the world insisted on reminding her that time was moving faster than she could keep up with. Mark lay beneath the blankets, far too still for a man who could usually light up a room just by walking into it. His eyes were closed, and though he wasn't completely unconscious, he drifted in and out as though his thoughts were wandering somewhere between dreams and memories. Soft, mechanical rhythms filled the air, not threatening or alarming, just steady, like robotic humming meant to imitate calm breathing. When Kelly leaned close earlier, he had tried to speak. The moment was small, quiet, but it had taken over her entire world. His voice was faint, a whisper, more than a word, but she heard it clearly. He had asked for the children. Not because he was in danger, not because something terrible was happening, but because he wanted them. He wanted their voices, their faces, their warmth, everything that made their strange, beautiful family feel complete. And that request alone had sent Kelly into motion like a storm waiting for permission to break. Now, sitting beside him, she held on to that request like it was a lifeline. Outside the large glass window of the room, the city glowed with its usual indifference. Cars came and went. People hurried to places that suddenly felt 1,000 miles away. Life continued as usual for everyone except the small group gathered here. Teresa, one of the nurses, moved quietly around the room. She was firm, calm, and annoyingly competent, which only made Kelly feel more helpless. "You can bring them in," Teresa said gently. "He'll be able to see them, and that may help him more than anything else we do." Kelly nodded, though her throat felt tight. She had already made the calls. One by one, she had reached out to each child, and the reactions had been as varied as their personalities. Anxiety, determination, panic, stubborn bravery. Everything had come through the phone. And now they were on their way. Kelly didn't want to sit and wait. She couldn't. So she stood near the elevators, arms wrapped around herself, watching the digital numbers climb. Every second that passed felt like it stretched the world thinner. Then, the doors slid open. Mateo stepped out first, shoulders slumped as though invisible weight rested heavily on him. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. Maybe grief aged people in minutes instead of years. He still wore his work uniform, apron shoved into his pocket, a stain of coffee stubbornly dried on his wrist. When his eyes met Kelly's, he didn't ask a single question. He simply hugged her, with all the desperation of someone who needed his mother more than he wanted to admit. The others followed close behind, like a wave pulled forward by something bigger than themselves. Lola, with her messy, tied-back hair and tired eyes, scanned the hallway as though searching for answers. Juan's usual bursts of energy had dimmed into a quiet tension. Even he, the constant jokester, was out of words for once. Little Jana and Louisa clung to their siblings, wide-eyed and trembling, too young to understand, but old enough to feel the fear. Kelly took a deep breath. She whispered to them, "He's awake sometimes. He's resting, but he's here, and he asked for you, all of you." Their steps toward the room were slow, almost ceremonial, as though they were approaching something sacred. And in a way they were. The sight of Mark through the glass wall made them all pause. Not because he looked frightening, he didn't, but because he looked different. Smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way none of them had ever seen. Kelly exhaled. All right, she murmured. Let's go in. The moment the door opened, the air changed. The warm scent of damp clothes and worried children mixed with the sterile hospital smell. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Lola stepped forward, courage blooming in her like a quiet sunrise. She reached for her dad's hand. Dad? Her voice was so soft it seemed fragile, but the effect was immediate. Mark stirred. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, he opened them. His gaze drifted until it found Lola, and something gentle lit up behind the exhaustion. A single tear, small but powerful, slipped down the side of his face. That one tear undid them all. Jana burst into soft sobs. Louisa hid her face in Wayne's jacket. Mateo clenched his jaw and stepped forward, placing a grounding hand on his father's leg. "We're here, Dad," he said, steady and sure, "just like you asked." And for a moment, just a brief one, the world seemed to realign. Even Wayne, who had stayed frozen near the back of the group, stepped closer. He stared at his father, searching for something familiar in this strange version of the strong man he idolized. Then he swallowed hard. "You look like you lost a wrestling match with a sofa," he tried to joke, his voice cracking awkwardly. Mark didn't laugh, not really, but the corner of his lips curved. A tiny smile. A victory in itself. Kelly watched everything, her heart swelling so painfully it felt like it might burst. She hadn't cried since this whole ordeal had begun, not really. But seeing her children circle around the man they loved most, it was too much. She moved to the other side of the bed, brushing her fingers gently along Mark's arm, letting him feel her presence without overwhelming him. His gaze shifted slowly toward her, and when their eyes met, gratitude, love, relief, and a quiet apology that said more than words ever could. She leaned in and whispered softly, "They're all here, just like you wanted." The kids inched closer, forming a crooked, emotional semicircle around the bed. Their fear was still there, hovering like a shadow, but it was softened now by something stronger: togetherness. For a few long moments, the room existed outside the world. Just them. Their strange, loud, mismatched, beautiful family gathered around the man who had always been their center of gravity. It didn't feel like a hospital anymore. It felt like home. Kelly brushed a hand through Mark's hair and he closed his eyes, leaning ever so slightly into the touch. "You'll be fine," she whispered, half for him, half for herself. "Not because the doctors say so, because we say so. And we're very stubborn." That earned another tiny smile from him. Then Mateo stepped closer and said, "Dad, we brought something." He reached into his bag and pulled out a crumpled photo, one of the kids piled on top of Mark in a ridiculous stack from a beach trip years ago. Everyone was sunburned and laughing. He held it where Mark could see. Mark blinked hard, then breathed slowly, deeply, like he was pulling strength straight from the picture. Lola added softly, "And we're staying with you today. All of us." Kelly looked at the group, and warmth spread through her like sunrise breaking over a dark horizon. This was what Mark needed. Not fear, not panic, not grief. Just love. Their love. Loud, chaotic, imperfect, overwhelming love. Kelly squeezed his hand. "We're not going anywhere," she murmured. "Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." Mark's eyes softened as he looked around at each of them, slow and deliberate. Even in his tired state, he seemed to count them, like he was memorizing the moment. Then he looked back at Kelly, and in that look was every promise they'd ever made. Every laugh, every argument, every kiss, every shared morning coffee, every moment that had built the life they had. She leaned in and pressed a soft kiss on his forehead. "We love you," she whispered. The children echoed the words, each in their own tone, some soft, some trembling, some awkward, but sincere. And in that tiny hospital room, bright lights, lemon scent, humming machines and all, something miraculous happened. Mark smiled, a real smile, weak, tired, but real. And for the first time in hours, the room didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive. It felt like hope. And Kelly held on to that, tightly, fiercely, like the promise it was. Before the moment faded, she whispered to the viewers, the listeners, the unseen audience of this unfolding story. Hold your people close, love them loudly, and never wait for a perfect moment. Create one. Then, with a breath that felt deeper than any she had taken all day, she added warmly, "Stay with us. There's more to this journey, and you won't want to miss what comes next."